How important is representation in comics? Now, representation means a bunch of different things depending on how you're using it, what you're describing. So today, what we're talking about is specifically actual characters in comics being representative of a diverse population. How important is that? We're going to go into it. Hey there, this is Perch. This is one of those topics that frequently gets the downvotes and gets people kind of riled up on either side. I always suspect that they listen to about 20 seconds and then they like, he's a bigot, and then they move on. And I think that's not, I wish you guys would listen just a little longer before you jump to that conclusion. Because in this video, I'm specifically talking about representation within comics, meaning comic characters, not the creators. I mean, that's a video for another day. And I think it's important to actually break the topic up because I do believe that whether you're talking about creators and how do we increase different types of storytellers and should we try and increase different storytellers and what background should they come from and all that, that's a different problem to solve than say increasing diversity in terms of actual characters, fictional characters within comics. I think that's the methods of each is different, but frequently they get lumped together. And I think when they get lumped together, not only does it create a lot of misunderstanding and arguments, but it also creates a lot of nothing. So if you are pushing for more diversity, either in the creator, the talent pool, or in the characters, I think you are doing your own goal a disservice by lumping these things together. I don't think you get what you want. I'm a pragmatic person. I think people, whether I agree or disagree with the topic at hand, I think if you're going to spend effort into doing something, then you should be getting what you want. You should be at least moving toward a goal. So there's this comment that goes on in comics about comics need to reflect a more diverse reading audience in order to sell. And it's an interesting statement. It hides one kind of real fact, which may be an ugly fact, and that is the population reading comics is not a even pie. It's not like every single piece of the pie is different. It's not like you have, you know, whatever it would be, 18.3% white and 18.3% black and 18.3% Mexican, and you don't have this even distribution of demographics, races, or genders, or any of that inside comics. It's not an even split. So therefore, when you're trying to say, "Hey, we want to sell comics, we want to increase sales," because at the end of the day, you are trying to sell comics. That is the point. If the comics never sold and they just sat on the shelves, then very quickly people wouldn't make comics. It's not Comics is not a charity. Comics is intended to sell comics. But therein lies another big myth, and that big myth is, hey, if we want, say, Asian kids to read comics, then we need to be able to have Asian superheroes in that comic because if we don't have Asian superheroes, then the Asian kid isn't going to read the comic because they don't find themselves in the comic. And that's I think there's lots of evidence to suggest that is not true. Now it doesn't mean you don't try and put Asian characters in comics. Not at all. My point is, though, that whatever your race, your gender, your sexuality, any of that, a good story is a good story, and you will read it. Lots and lots of white kids of both genders, all genders, whatever, whoever we're going with here, they liked Spider-Man, Miles Morales, Into the Multiverse. They liked that. Into the Spider-Verse. They liked that movie. It was cool. It featured an African American black main character. It featured a white supporting character and a female supporting character as the main characters, and then like a pig and some other things. But you had Spider Gwen, you had old Peter Parker, and you had Miles as characters in this movie. And guess what? All races seemed to like it. All genders seemed to like it. It was a popular movie that people thought was good. So I don't think you have to say introduce characters for the sake of getting those people into a story. I think writing a good story will do that. But on the other hand, and here's where I think a lot of people kind of miss it a bit, it's not a bad idea to have, lots of diverse, representative characters in your comics. And I think you're being a bit limiting if you say we need a white character, black character, Mexican character, an Asian character, we need a gay character, we need a lesbian character, we need a transgender, we need, and we have this little checklist to go off. I think you have in comics, you can have characters from different times, you can have different alien races, you can have all kinds of different things represented within the pages of your comic. The question becomes, is the story strong to support it? I point to Saga, which I often do. There you've got a character of, different alien races, look kind of vaguely white Latino, maybe. I mean, something, depending on the coloring and the shading, can't quite tell. They've got wings and horns, so I'm not sure what, if you want to tag them with a human race, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But we also have a transgender character, we have gay characters, we have all kinds of different things going on in that comic, and it seems to work out just fine, and the characters seem to add something to the story. If Saga had nothing but straight white characters, I mean, again, they're aliens, so this doesn't make complete sense, but if you had white looking straight characters off doing their space thing, it would be a less interesting story. And think about that for a moment. It would be fundamentally a less interesting Saga. Would not be Saga if you didn't have the different kind of genders represented, different sexuality. It wouldn't be the same. And so, therefore, you can make, I think, a solid argument to say more representation, different representation can really add to the story. And thus, if it's a good story, bring in other readers, bring in other people reading it. So I don't think that's a bad thing. But I think, again, it all links back to the story. And this is my mentality. And I admit, mine alone. Other people can think differently, can be different, can have their own views on it. But to me, a great comic, and whether it's going to land with readers and stick and be solid, it all starts from story first. Write a core story, figure out what you're trying to tell, the emotions, the dynamic, everything that goes into it, and then branch out from there. And as it branches out, you will find other ways to represent the diverse cast, or maybe not. I mean, if you're telling a superhero story in, say, northern Atlanta, or not Atlanta, Georgia. Holy crap! There's a lot of street noise around here. Sorry about that. I again, doing this in the car, you get treated to a lot of different random craziness. Sounds like there's somebody has put an amplifier on their muffler and is just blasting their 1982 station wagon just down the street there. But okay. Anyway, I lost my train of thought completely. I guess my point in all is if you have a good core story, you branch off from there. I think you get to good places, whatever you're trying to do in terms of diversity. And I think the counterpoint to that is if you think diversity first, like, okay, we got to work our checklist. We got to have a this and a that and one of these and one of those, and now let's figure out the story around it. I think you get to a less interesting comic. But I want to recognize, and this is where the people who download the video who go, you're a bigot, kind of right off the gate, this is the part they don't hear often in the videos, is a lot of people, I want to acknowledge that a lot of people use the reasoning I just used as a way to make just white stories. And nothing but, these kind of white, straight male superhero, they've got muscles and shoulder pads and guns, and that's what we're going to have. They'll use my same argument, like, you should focus on story first. And I would argue that if you're just making the same type of story over and over and over again, you aren't focusing on story first. You're focusing on derivative concepts that people have seen a lot. And so you're actually doing no better. So I want to acknowledge that people use the same argument I just used to kind of backdoor into these very boring, very vanilla comics that do not sell and nobody cares about. And nobody cares about. There are some comics out there that are just doing their all white thing, male dudes running around with guns, and nobody buys them. They're anemic in sales. You might go, where are these comics? They're there. Go to the Comic-Con list and scroll all the way down to 200, 300. They exist. They're indie comics that don't sell well. So I think if you attack it from either extreme, you attack it either from a diversity checklist first, or you go in with kind of the story you really want to tell is just this one very boring story. You ignore kind of the centerpiece, which is what's an engaging, powerful story narrative I want to tell, and how am I going to make it a rich experience for everyone. I think you fail unless you do that middle part. That's again just me. Different people have different methods for how they tell their story. That's fine. But to me, I think that's how it lands. The other part to this video, I think, to go into a little bit, and this is again more my opinion, and I take it for leave it, and you're welcome to argue with it. I like the disagreement. Is how important is it for kids? How important is it for a young girl who's maybe questioning her sexuality and thinking she might be lesbian? How important is it for her to pick up a comic and see another kind of lesbian character in that comic and be able to relate to that experience and help her with her own journey? Is that important? Well, to me, yes and no. So the yes part is that as kids, as people coming up in the world, we're looking for experiences. We're looking for things to tell our story, to help us navigate through the world. The world is a weird and scary place, and parents will help their children, but they're feeding off of all kinds of things in the environment. Until you have children, you may not fully digest this idea, but children are sponges, and in many cases, they're desperately trying to soak up things to help them explain and rationalize what's going on in the world. So having things to help them do that, having characters they can relate to, or things that they can kind of help steer their lives with, are important. That's the yes part. The no part is maybe a 22-page comic titled Fatal Furies is not the best place to have that formulative character. I think and keep in mind, it's coming from a guy who sells comics. I think comics have a place in our cultural history and in helping us as people kind of learn and communicate and connect and all the rest. But I think if you're grappling with major issues or worries about your race or gender or sexuality, I would not point you to a comic book first, even if the comic book is amazing. Like, if you're a white kid trying to find your way in the world, you're a straight white male kid, I'm not going to point you at like 90s X Force and say, here you go, this is going to help you, be a person. That's not where I would go. And I've just found over time, yes, it is true. I have had the experience of little kids coming in going, hey, this superhero looks like me. You had that with Miles Morales when he first came about, or further back you had it with Black Lightning or the Falcon or some of those characters. Yeah, I have had that experience, and it's touching. It actually feels kind of cool. It feels cool. I mean, it feels like you're connecting in some way. That there's some joy that a kid found in a comic book, and I think that's really, really awesome. On the other hand, I would say that far more often, kids of all races, all genders, will come in and see some amazing, cool piece of Spider-Man art. I mean, the amount of kids that came in and saw Todd McFarlane killing it with Spider-Man and all the webs everywhere and the spiders, and he's got his mask on and he's all stretched out in a crazy pose and everything else. And the kid's like, wow, I want to be like Spider-Man. Mexican kids, Native American, Navajo kids, white, Asian, uh, all kinds of children, even French, even the Dutch. I don't, sorry, that's I'm being tongue in cheek here, but I think kids are looking for cool things to experience, and seeing themselves in characters can be helpful, can be important. But I think what a lot of people fail to understand is if the kid is if it's a crap comic, if it's a comic where the character just seems kind of very half-assed, and it's like, oh, look, here's an Inuit Indian in this comic, and it kind of has lame powers and it's not really doing much in the background. Most children will look at that as lame, or they'll actually spot it as being kind of a token diversity kind of thing faster than the adults do. They feel like they're being pandered to. Kids are really, really quick to pick up on when they think they're being pandered to. And those kinds of things tend to not land well. It's kind of like a previous video I did around racism and some of these environmental, some of these heavier topics in comics. You can do it, and if you can do it well, man, Godspeed, do it well. But that's a high bar. And bluntly, very few people are able to cross it. Chris Claremont, who I think is an amazing writer, wrote some incredibly tone deaf, goofy things where it related to religion and race and sexuality. Incredibly bad. That's Chris Claremont, who's regarded as one of the best comic writers of our lifetime. So be just if you're gonna put a character in to say, hey, a Navajo kid is going to be able to see a Navajo hero in this comic, and it will be theirs. Just be careful. Make it a cool. You got to make it cool. You got to make the character amazing. You got to make the character really speak to them. You cannot make some lame character with kind of lame powers that everybody knows is just going to be a kind of a background member of this team and be canceled in 5 issues. That doesn't help anyone. And frankly, if you're and I'm not saying, oh, then just stick to safe white characters. I'm not saying that. I'm saying strive to do it well. I'm saying if you want to write that, you want to write that transgender character into your comic, make them inspiring, make them great. Don't just say, hey, look what I got. Hey, look at this over here. Because that's how it comes across a lot of the time. And unfortunately, there are a decent amount of comic creators who live in this bubble where their buddies kind of pat them on the back saying, oh, wow, what a great comic. So brave, so stunning. And it's like the reading audience. I'm not talking about the white dudes who've been collecting comics for 40 years. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the audience you're trying to appeal to thinks you're lame. That it happens more often than not. So if you're going to do it well, do it right, land the message. Anyway, that's my thought. I probably said a bunch of things that have got a bunch of people riled up here. Didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry. But, I think these things, I want to see people succeed. I really do. There's no fake, wink, haha. I really want to see these comics succeed. And I have every issue of Saga in a long box, bagged and boarded. I've got these comics. I don't sit there and hate read them because they've got a transgender character in there. I think it was handled really, really well. That topic was handled very, very well. So good job. More handling well, please. All races, all genders, all everything. Handle it well. Write good stories. The rest works out for itself. That's what I believe anyway. How about you? What do you believe? Does any of this make sense? Am I off base here? Wrong? Either way, am I not understanding a certain experience the way I should? Am I not standing up for white dude comics enough? What is your opinion? Let me know in the comments below. Would love to hear your thoughts on it. Like, subscribe, downvote, whatever your heart tells you to do. Cool. Follow me on Twitter at Comic Perch. Thanks for listening.